The New Orleans Axeman, the demon who demanded jazz in 1919, a killer claiming to be a demon from hell promised to spare any home where jazz music played. The entire city responded. Late spring in New Orleans, 1918. The city breathes thick air off the Mississippi, humid and heavy with the smell of the river and the sound of music drifting from open windows. In this moment, someone begins entering homes through back doors, chiseling away wooden panels with precision, stepping through the openings into darkened hallways where families sleep. The weapon is always an axe. The weapon is always left behind. The victims are predominantly Italian-American grocery store owners and their families, people who have built small businesses in the neighborhoods along the river, who keep their doors locked and their windows shuttered against the heat and the night. The locks do not matter. The Axeman comes anyway. The New Orleans Police Department responds to the first attack in May 1918 with the procedural efficiency of a department that has seen violence before, that knows how to document a crime scene and catalog evidence. Officers photograph the chiseled door panels, measure the openings, examine the axes left at each scene. The pattern emerges quickly: backdoor entry, sleeping victims, blunt force trauma, no apparent motive beyond the violence itself. The investigation produces suspects, produces theories, produces nothing that leads to an arrest. The attacks continue through the summer and into the fall, a rhythm of violence that punctuates the city's nights with a terror that has no face and no explanation. The victims who survive describe waking to pain and darkness, to the shape of someone standing over them in the moment before consciousness fails. They describe nothing useful to the investigation, no identifying features, no words spoken, no motive articulated. The victims who do not survive leave behind families and businesses and questions that the police cannot answer. The Italian-American community responds with fear and vigilance, with rumors of vendetta and Black Hand extortion, with theories that the attacks are targeted rather than random. The police investigate each theory and find no evidence to support any of them. The Axeman is not operating according to any criminal logic the department recognizes. The Axeman is something else. March 1919. The Times-Picayune receives a letter. So do multiple city officials. The letter is typed, grammatically correct, and signed the Axeman. The newspaper publishes it on March 13, 1919, and the city reads what may be the most extraordinary document in American criminal history. The letter identifies its author as a demon from the hottest hell, an entity that has existed in various forms throughout human history, that has walked among mortals and taken pleasure in their fear. The letter states that the author is not human, has never been human, and finds the police investigation amusing in its futility. The letter then makes a promise. On the following Tuesday, March 18, at exactly midnight, the Axeman will descend upon New Orleans to claim more victims. But there is a condition. Any home in which jazz music is playing at that precise moment will be spared. Any home that is silent will receive a visit. The letter is analyzed by the police, by handwriting experts, by journalists and city officials who attempt to determine its authenticity. No handwriting match is found to any known suspect. The letter is either genuine communication from the killer or an elaborate hoax timed to coincide with an active murder investigation. The city of New Orleans, faced with this choice, makes a decision that reveals something fundamental about its character. The city decides to play jazz. Tuesday, March 18, 1919, approaches with a mixture of dread and defiance that the newspapers document in daily reports. Jazz venues prepare for unprecedented crowds. Bands schedule performances that will begin before midnight and continue past it. Private homes organize parties, purchase records, arrange for musicians to play in courtyards and parlors and anywhere music can be heard. The city makes a collective choice. If the Axeman wants jazz, the city will give him jazz loud enough to reach whatever hell he claims to come from. Midnight arrives. New Orleans explodes with music. Every jazz club in the city is packed beyond capacity, with crowds spilling into the streets. Bands play from balconies, from open windows, from makeshift stages erected in neighborhood squares. The music is not subtle, and it is not quiet. The music is a declaration, a refusal to be silent in the face of terror, a choice to meet a demon's challenge with the one weapon the city has always had. The music plays through the night, a citywide performance that is part ritual, part celebration, part direct challenge to whatever entity has been terrorizing the population for 10 months. The New Orleans Police Department documents what happens next with the same procedural efficiency it has brought to every other aspect of the investigation. Officers patrol the streets, visit neighborhoods, respond to calls. The department's record for March 18, 1919 shows no attacks, not a single chiseled door panel, not a single axe left behind, not a single family waking to violence in the darkness. The axeman keeps his word. The correlation between the music and the absence of attacks is a documented fact. What it proves remains a question that the investigation never definitively answers. The police file notes the unusual citywide response to the letter, notes the absence of attacks on that specific night, notes the impossibility of determining whether the correlation represents cause and effect or coincidence. The department continues its investigation with increased urgency, attempting to use the letter as evidence that might lead to identification and arrest. The letter provides no such leads. The handwriting analysis produces no matches. The typewriter used to compose the letter is never identified. The axeman remains unknown. The attacks resume after March 18, but with decreased frequency. The axeman strikes again in August 1919, attacking a grocery store owner who survives and provides no useful description. Another attack follows in September. Then, in October 1919, the violence stops. No warning, no final letter, no explanation. The axeman simply ceases to exist in the documented record. The New Orleans Police Department continues its investigation for months, then years, waiting for another attack that never comes. The case remains open because there is no arrest to close it, no death to attribute it to, no confession to provide closure. The case closes itself through absence, through the simple fact that the axeman never returns. The letter survives in the city's archives, preserved as evidence in an unsolved case and as a cultural document that captures something essential about New Orleans' relationship with the supernatural. The letter is studied by criminologists attempting to understand serial killer psychology, by historians examining the city's response to terror during the final year of World War I, by paranormal researchers investigating the intersection of documented crime and claimed supernatural identity. The letter resists easy categorization. It is evidence of a crime, certainly. It is also evidence of something else, something that does not fit cleanly into conventional criminal frameworks. The question of what the axeman was remains unanswered in any official capacity. The human explanation suggests a serial predator who used the letter as psychological warfare, who claimed demonic identity to increase fear, and who happened to choose not to attack on the night he had promised immunity to jazz listeners. This explanation accounts for the physical evidence, the attacks themselves, the methodology of entry and violence. It does not fully account for the letter's specific promise and the specific outcome that followed. It does not explain why a human predator would make a verifiable promise that could expose him to capture if broken, or why he would then honor that promise so completely that not a single attack occurred on the designated night. The supernatural explanation suggests something that exists outside conventional criminal psychology, an entity that may have been demon or spirit or something without adequate name, that was capable of violence in the physical world and communication through written language, that understood the city's culture well enough to know that jazz was the appropriate demand to make. This explanation accounts for the letter's tone, its claim to immortality and inhuman origin, its promise of immunity tied to a specific cultural practice. It does not account for the physical evidence that suggests a human perpetrator, the chiseled door panels that require human hands and human tools, the axes that were standard household implements rather than supernatural manifestations. The New Orleans Police Department's file presents both possibilities without committing to either. The investigation documents a series of violent attacks that were never solved, a letter that claimed supernatural origin and made a verifiable promise, and a citywide response that treated the promise seriously enough to test it with music that lasted through the night. These are the facts. The interpretation remains open. The legacy of the Axeman case extends beyond its documentation in police files and newspaper archives. The case becomes part of New Orleans cultural memory, a story that is told and retold, that is adapted into songs and plays and novels, that represents something fundamental about the city's willingness to confront terror with creativity rather than with silence. The jazz played on March 18, 1919, is remembered as one of the city's defining moments, a night when an entire population chose music over fear, chose to answer a demon's letter with the only response that made sense in a city where music has always been sacred. The case reminds us that some investigations produce answers while others produce better questions. The New Orleans Axeman investigation produces both the documented facts of unsolved attacks and the documented mystery of why those attacks stopped on the one night when the entire city played jazz in direct response to a letter from someone who claimed to be a demon from hell. The city that buried its dead with brass bands, that invented jazz in the brothels of Storyville, that survived yellow fever and hurricane and occupation through music, that refused to stop playing, faced a terror that may have been human or may have been something else, and chose the response that has always sustained it. The music played, the promise held, the Axeman never returned. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.